As my team and I weave through the bustle of traffic in Kenya's capital, Nairobi, I cannot help noticing the erratic weather pattern which is mimicking the current weather facing many media houses. The freedom of expression and the media freedom enshrined in Article 33 and Article 35 of the Constitution of Kenya 2010 respectively is facing threats both internally and externally, just like the climate. Here's some of the views we got on the state of investigative journalism in Kenya and the media capture.
But how I ended up here was the producer at the time was working on a story about children and women and mothers losing their babies. Now say less. He caught me, he hooked me right on that. I am a mother and I can't imagine losing my children in any way. Whatever would happen, I just could not imagine that. And I wanted to find out what was happening. And so it was easy for me. It came so naturally for me to want to help, to find out what's happening and to stop it. Because it's too painful to bury a child, whatever age. But that these ones were being stolen and then they disappear without a trace. And there's few that are found, but who's stealing these children? Where are they taking them? Are they ever found? Is there hope for finding your child? How does a mother live knowing that their child is somewhere out there? Are they safe? Did they sleep well? Are they eating? Are they loved? Are they taken care of?
And this was back when?
This was in 2020. This was in 2020. So it was just around that COVID time.
I landed into investigative journalism, I would say by chance, because I had not really set out and planned that I would be in investigations. So for a long time I was a regional reporter for KTN, based in Kakamega, then in Mombasa. But it's in Mombasa that I realized that there is a gap that I need to fill as a journalist. So at that time there were so many things happening in Mombasa. Ethnic wars, there was the issue of drugs in Mombasa. So I noticed that most of the reports that were coming out of Mombasa were just general reporting, just reporting on events. I felt like we needed to go in depth on some of the things that were happening. And my first big break, I think, in investigations was a story I did about the clashes that were happening in Tana River. At that time, there were a lot of issues happening. There were a lot of misrepresentation in the media. So when I went down into the community, started talking to these people, getting the story that hasn't been told, the stories that powers that were at that time wanted concealed, that was the time that I noticed that, yes, I think there is a huge calling on me to start being a proper investigative journalist.
Yeah, I joined Nation in '94 as a cab reporter and grew there through the ranks. Did everything. Those days used to start by your first assignment used to be to go to police headquarters to read the previous day's files. Of course, most of it, the juicy stuff was always redacted, blacked out actually. But we could still pick out a few things. The beauty with those days is that media houses invested in good journalism. So we used to use the police reports as tips to be developed further. And so basically you joined the newsroom, did press conferences, went to police HQ and all that, and then graduated to cover, if you were good enough, you graduated now to cover the more specialist areas, which were the courts and parliament, which now introduced you to political reportage. So that was sort of the career path. But you started every morning before 8, you were at the police headquarters, which was, them days it was Vigilance House, still is, even though the Inspector General of Police sits elsewhere. But those days, just on the ground floor, there was a room where you went and you found the register with police incidents.
Various aspects to do with investigative journalism. So whether it is how to investigate issues, how to interview people, how to find documents, how to bring everything together That is something that is often done. And students sometimes get to do maybe pieces on investigative journalism from a student perspective. What I know though is that the universities and colleges oftentimes offer the skills and knowledge to understand investigative journalism or to get the skills on how to conduct investigative journalism.
When I joined journalism, investigative desks were already operational. So I can't claim to be the founder of investigative journalism, but there were pioneers. People were ahead of us. Mutegi Njau, for example. There was a guy on the Standard called Kipsongok, who were people we used to admire even when we were students, because they used to bring out big stories, scandals. They used to reveal scandals. They used to do in-depth reporting. In that league, I would also put Mohamed Warsama. There are two Mohamed Warsamas, the older Warsama and the late William Onyango. So those are the real pioneers of investigative journalism in Kenya.
I mean, the moment I was told about it, I immediately said, what do you want me to do? Yeah. And from then on, as you do this story, you see other things, because then followed the story of the children that are forced to beg, abducted from their homes. Their families are told telltales stories, and then they let their disabled child go with this person who was also disabled. They come into Kenya, then they lose contact, and that child is enslaved. They live with this master who puts them out in the streets to beg for money, picks them up, puts them up very early in the morning, picks them up in the evening, late in the evening, puts them in their house, and then the cycle continues. And this child has nowhere to go. They can't talk to anyone. They are watched, and there's no chance of them reuniting with their families. Some of them can't even talk. And this is something you continue to see as you're working on this. This becomes, it's calling at you. It's so there. And I remember when you did that story, everybody was like, I've been seeing these children and I've been wondering. And I'm like, we all see them. Yeah. We all see them, right? And you've probably asked yourself a couple of questions, but you just go about your business and you give money and you do your good deed for the day.
I would say, I think we had people who set the pace for us in this country in investigative journalism in a way. They set a good pace. So most of us are students of those people. And the space of investigative journalism is in a way shrinking. You would expect it to widen, but it's shrinking in a way. And largely because of so many factors playing around with the government issues, and also, of course, media houses not ready to really invest in investigative journalism. So for me, it's been a personal cause. I know there are all these factors working against me in so many ways, but it's been a personal cause because I really want to be that voice, the voice that tells stories that not so many people want them told, and because they are largely pegged on public interest.
Investigative journalism was now even higher than political journalism. You were only taken to the investigative desk after your editors confirmed that you have the thorax. Plus also there was the element of integrity, that you will not be bent by material things and things like that. And all those people I've mentioned, the William Ochiengs, the Kipsongoks, the Warsama and all, were comfortable people, but you can't say they were overly rich. Because they did their job without expecting inducement or without falling to inducement. So there is, I think we were picked from among people who are curious. First of all, you have to show an element of curiosity. You don't just accept things on face value, you dig deeper.
But we need to open up more spaces, and my biggest challenge would be to newsrooms. They need to be deliberate about it. Set up desks that are properly geared towards telling stories that are investigative, in-depth, because right now you cannot compete with the new media. There's so many things coming up. They tell stories perhaps better than even mainstream media at times. So for you to have an edge with audiences, I would say that newsrooms cannot bargain on this. They have to open up desks that are properly centered on investigations.
Investigative journalism is critical to a society because you're investigating say government wrongdoing, you're investigating the leadership, and you're trying then to hold them to account for either failures caused by commission or omission. And this is something that organizations understand.
I've been an activist for the last 15 years, okay? So being an investigative journalist is part of the activism. It's another level of exposing the ills in our society. As an activist, it's been a total exposure for a long time. So it starts with here. Do I feel safe? What could happen to me? Why hasn't it happened to me all this time? Why do I think it would happen to me now? Now more than ever, we need to be very vocal. We need to speak even louder.
The biggest challenge, I think, for me is that newsrooms are not really investing in investigative journalism. But I'm lucky to be in one of the media houses that really has a reputation on investigative journalism and has been trying to trail that kind of facet of journalism. So it's a personal journey. You wouldn't really say that you wouldn't walk as an industry, you walk in this journey individually. So for me, a lot of learning. I've been attending lots of conferences, lots of trainings along this line. I was lucky to work closely with some of the best journalists at BBC who do investigations. So it's been lots of learning, lots of crafting my craft. And I think it's getting better. It's getting better despite all these factors that are happening. But we need to open up more spaces, and my biggest challenge would be to newsrooms. They need to be deliberate about it. Set up desks that are properly geared towards telling stories that are investigative, in-depth, because right now you cannot compete with the new media. There's so many things coming up. They tell stories perhaps better than even mainstream media at times.
So first, they are not investing in human capital. They are not investing in human capacity building. They are hardly employing investigative journalists. So that is a failure on their part. Mainly because, as I said, it's expensive, and media houses, particularly those ones that are interested in making some sort of profit, or at least monetizing their content, it is important that they try and recoup some of the investments that they've made, whether it is employing people or whether it is conducting the investigations themselves. And the questions that they often ask is, what is the return on investment? So if you're putting in $1 million shillings, you want to be able to either increase your circulation of your newspapers, or you want to attract more viewers or more visitors to your website.
The people are not going out and talking to real human beings. They are monitoring what's happening on social media and using that as if it is the alpha and omega, as if it is the beginning and the end, and writing stories from that. It's desktop journalism is killing what used to be called investigative and specialist journalism. So I would put the evolution to that, because there isn't any more investment and any more curiosity among journalists. And I don't think it's a question of age, because when we joined the newsroom, we were in our 20s, in our early 20s, and were curious enough. We did not. So that is there. It is, I think, the frustration that people get when they get to the newsroom. A good, fast developing reporter will get to the newsroom and find, yes, I have this idea, I have this. But unless a sponsor is found, and it used to be a crime for a news source to sponsor a journalist to do a story. I mean, it was never there. Nowadays, newsrooms say they have to enter into what they are calling sugarcoating as partnerships for what the newsrooms themselves should be investing in. You see, if it is health, why must newsrooms rely on big international donors to finance their desks to do it? I mean, it's part of their business. Their business exists to sell news. And if they are selling news, they should invest in getting that news. It's not happening. So you find that an investigative piece will not be done unless Transparency International or another international an anti-corruption agency has financed journalists. Why? I mean, media houses exist to give people these stories. They should not give it, they should not outsource their business to somebody else.
So if they lose their funding, then they have to keep the one who funds them happy, right? But even when they're keeping the one who funds them happy, that means they cannot tell the stories that they need to tell, or tell the stories how they need to tell them. So a lot of stories cannot be pursued, or maybe even if they're pursued, cannot be aired, because they taint, and I use the word taint here loosely, but they present this person in bad light. Yes. So you kill that story. I mean, stories are killed. They've been killed for a very long time. It's just gotten worse. And in part, it's not maybe the journalist who goes out, maybe it's the editors, those who decide what gets printed and what makes it on air.
I think in Kenya we are lucky because there are countries there where you cannot talk about investigative journalism completely. So in Kenya we have our challenges. I'm not saying we are there yet, but I think we have a space to tell. We have, the Media Council of Kenya is doing a pretty good job in protecting people who do investigations. So I feel like we are not there yet, but in Kenya the space is, it's there. Might be shrinking, but it's there. So on state capture, yes, there are stories that you cannot tell about government. That's true. But I think we cannot despair. We must keep on pushing and telling these stories, no matter how uncomfortable it makes people to feel.
Computer Misuse Act that has been used to criminalize, for instance, publication of damaging information to some extent. So we might think that criminal defamation is gone, but it is still there through such legislation, because the moment you publish information that is damaging to someone by using certain gadgets, especially computers and all these technologies, then you sort of broken the law. And of course, as we know, that is applied selectively when they think that it is certain people or certain actors that are affected by that publication. Again, maybe the short answer is that we might as well be pronouncing, or announcing and writing the obituary of investigative journalism.
And the other problem that may have crept into our system is that journalists are themselves identifying publicly with political causes. You see, with political parties, with political leaders and all. And that, I know, for example, there are big media companies on the Western world, like the BBC, where you're not, actually the editorial policy guidelines stipulates that nobody should ever tell which side you're even going to vote. Nowadays, I can tell you from following social media where, and with 90% accuracy, where people are going to vote, because it's so obvious the way people interact, the way they speak in public and all. It's so obvious where they are leaning. And sometimes it's not even capture. Sometimes it's people are fans of certain causes, and they transfer those to their work instead of divorcing their work from their personal preferences and personal friendships. So I wouldn't say it's media capture. Yes, there are efforts, subtle efforts to incorporate the media, but it's people who are falling into those traps. It used to be there even during those days that because threats may have been issued, incentives may have been issued, but people, you told off a guy, you remember the Youth for Kanu 92. They gave certain reporters and editors those days unimaginable sums of money, but those people were left the newsrooms. The newsrooms continued to work. Nowadays, the problem is individuals are captured, not the media itself, but individuals are captured and they remain in the newsroom.
Be what not to do. People will guide you. The path has already been lit. If you want to shine, you will try and go your own path, and put yourself at great risk. But you see, it's not just great risk. For myself, I have children, I have a husband, I have parents, I have siblings, I have colleagues. I put so many people at risk by trying to shine. Yeah, be driven by passion, not profit. Not how much money can you make out of this. Be driven by passion to make a difference. Sometimes, if everything can be paid for, you know, your movement and the story gets to see the light of day, then that's passion, because it's not about how much money will I make out of this story. With that, you'll find yourself even telling untruth stories, stories that are not true, because you've been given the right amount of money. Yeah, you must be grounded and willing to stand with the truth at all times, whatever the cost. Yeah.
I think my keen interest is improving the quality of our storytelling. We have an honest task really to see the new ways that stories are told. The media landscape keeps changing, evolving. There are so many tools coming in, the AIs and other things. So we must keep improving our storytelling, and we must keep mentoring younger generation, because you realize at some point there was a gap in investigative journalism in this country, where you had a certain crop of journalists moving out of the scene, then completely you don't see anyone taking over. So I think we have to keep mentoring, keep holding hands to journalists who are coming up, so that they're able to take up their roles, and we keep pushing this agenda.
You're able to share knowledge. You're able to produce graduates that are aware of the challenges, aware of the issues that face society, and then that is empowering itself, not only empowering to the people that you're producing and who you are helping advance their own careers, but me and the university as institutions and people that are interested in developing the human capital that we need to advance society. And yes, so and as we know, studies and research are what make universities. So we just don't want to be known as a teaching university. Otherwise, we'll be regurgitating or sharing the already existing knowledge. And oftentimes, it is Western produced, countries in the West, because of the resources that they have. They come to Africa, for instance, and investigate certain issues. They go out and produce books or produce journals. And out of that, then, they bring the books to us, and we share the knowledge that is contained in that books. But our ability to produce primary knowledge and to use that knowledge to illustrate the things that we are teaching is what we should be known for.
There has to be collaborations, and collaborations serve two purposes. One, you pull all your resources together. Number two, you are protected in terms of numbers. Numbers as individuals, numbers as organizations. It's easier to hit one person. It's easier to hit one organization. But if 5 organizations are collaborating to bring out something, it's not easy to hit the 5. So collaboration, because of the way the business is today, the challenges that the media business is undergoing, collaboration will have to be. During our time, by 2017, 2016, Nation was sitting on 3 billion shillings, its own money. So we were not scared. We would tell off anybody because we had money. Our own, we were making serious profits up to 1.8 billion a year. So it was good. But now, the realities of the days are that profits, the business model is challenged because of new media. And so it's only good that people collaborate, do dockets jointly, and share out these responsibilities and work.
Good morning. My name is Winnie Kamau from Talk Africa. When a spokesman, you mentioned a big thing about the fertilizer, and it came out of investigative journalism. And my question to you, do you think that in Kenya, the position of investigative journalists, and especially you're addressing journalists right now, what is your position? And then I have two more questions. Do you think there's political interest that is interfering in this in investigative journalism? And the last one is, do you think there's media capture in Kenya?
Now, on the issue of Winnie Kamau from Talk Africa, the Kenya Kwanza administration has always supported free media, freedom of the press. Always. Even when the press was against it, the mainstream media was against this administration during the campaign. So, journalists are allowed to investigate. They may come up to the right findings that help everyone, and if you want to believe that is not the case, look at Muhammad Ali, who is actually a Kenya Kwanza president. That's how he made his name, he is the president. So for whoever did this, it is making it national controversy. And it is true, there are allegations that are being investigated as to whether really there is fake fertilizer or not. There has been suspension of distribution of some of these products, as you may have seen the letter from the Principal Secretary for Crop Development, Ronald. So that being the case, therefore, that tells you there is agency in journalists investigating matters, but there is no room in this administration for any form of victimization going forward. We agree, for example, that a lot of changes are happening within the media circle. And the Office of the Government Spokesperson, being the National Government Communication Center, stands with the journalists and believes that you play a very critical role in disseminating whatever information that you want to take to the public. And it's a partnership. And I would want to encourage you to continuously work with us so that we are able to deliver on our mandate. So any person who is investigating an issue, please go ahead, as long as you report objectively and factually, and of course you bring to the light. That is the role of the fourth estate. We have benefited in the past as a country from your work. And so therefore, you remember even in my previous address, I called out those people who, led to the death of the blogger in Meru. And people must be protected, going forward, because you are doing a patriotic duty in informing the members of the public what is happening. Yeah, so generally that's what I can say concerning the media. And there is no government policy whatsoever to suppress the media. We are not in that.